This presentation explores women's fashion from 1890 to 1907. This era is called different terms depending on where you live or what you are interested in. One general term, la Belle Epoch, is used by many cultural historians. This was an era of great economic prosperity and scientific innovation. The arts flourished in France, leading the way for arts and pop culture around the world. Numerous masterpieces of art, architecture, music, and literature redefined these art forms to introduce modernism. Historians looked back to think it was a beautiful age that would be brutally ended by World War I. The term progressive era is an American history or political term used to define social activism and political reform. Progressives tackled the rampant social effects of industrialization, such as political corruption and bribery. Politics was governed by powerful ward bosses and wealthy interests. Social activists agitated for public education, unions, votes for women, eradication of tenements, and public health. The British referred to this as the Edwardian era. Queen Victoria died in 1901, and her son Edward became king, ushering in a glorious swirl of social activities and renewed cultural pursuits, such as the theater and the nightlife. Fin de siècle is a term referring to the end of the century and the end of a glorious era. These four terms are the most commonly used to describe the memorable 17 years of La Belle Epoque. They were so instrumental that the British TV show Downton Abbey ran for 6 years, documenting all the social changes that occurred. There are two major silhouettes for women's fashion. The first, from 1890 to 1896, is the X shape or a figure 8. The shoulders and hem will be roughly equal, emphasizing a small waist. The second silhouette, from 1897 to 1907, is the S curve or Grecian bend. The front of the body is pushed forwards and the hips are pushed back. The ideal shape is somewhat like two eggs tilted together. The X-shaped silhouette is a power shape, reflecting that women are beginning to find their voice in society. They are fighting for the right to vote, entering the job market, and participating in social initiatives and many reform movements. The waist will look small by comparison, but in fact corsets will ease considerably from the prior bustle era. Visual emphasis will rise to the shoulder and head area. I can't help but think of Elizabethan fashion that emphasized the head, just as the Renaissance was developing humanism. But this time around, the Renaissance is for women. Some jackets, such as this one, featured trumpet-shaped collars, which I find very like a ruff. Hats widen to balance the wider shoulder and hem of the X shape. Many dresses and jackets will feature wide, turn-back lapels called revers, an exaggerated version of men's suit lapels. Society will divide over new rules for women. The term New Woman was invented by Irish writer Sarah Grand in an influential newspaper article. She described independent women who were educated or career-minded or those striving to bring about radical social change. Magazines and popular culture then created two opposing persona to describe these progressive women and their opposite, conservative women. Many women probably fell somewhere in between, of course, and we will see all three points of view reflected in their fashion choices. All the fashion choices featured these wide sleeves called balloon sleeves, Lego mutton, or demi-guilloche. Another signature of this era is the very high collar. A long neck was considered the most ideal. Modern women will begin to favor wearing a blouse called a shirtwaist and skirt instead of a full gown. The bolero jacket from the 1860s will return as once again a more free way of dressing. The skirt shape is called a Belle skirt to describe the gradual widening from hip line to hem. Women can choose to wear a blouse and a skirt as everyday attire, with different shaped belts over the skirt waistband. Shirtwaists are available in a wide array of colors and patterns. The fashion plate on the right shows a number of collar and ties that come directly from menswear. This is a very freeing way of dressing after the formality of the bustle era, and this practical style becomes the hallmark of the new woman. Note the women in the photograph are all tilted to one side. That is the effect of wearing a corset. It's impossible to fold your torso forward or slouch sideways the way we do today. Two of the shirtwaists feature a contrast collar with a bow in back, a popular style that reversed men's bow ties, placing a full puffy bow in the back of the neck. This style was called a dog collar or a pussycat bow, depending on your animal of choice. Perhaps the biggest fashion news of this era is that women adapt the tailored suit for themselves. Called tailor-made suits, this was regarded at the time as women taking on a distinctively masculine appearance. In 1893, the New York Times praised this style, saying, "This season's revolution in gown designs is the most suitable all-around costume yet invented for women. With the help of fancy blouses, dainty laces, and similar knickknacks, the tailor gown may be transformed into something much more elaborate at a moment's notice." This is indeed a revolutionary idea in women's dress. The choice to dress up or down the same outfit instead of owning different clothing for different events. This appealed to the wealthy middle classes who appreciated the practicality. Some tailor-mades were created from wool fabric and others were made of dressy fabrics to lend a more feminine interpretation. The version at left is made of a dressy fabric with luster, perhaps a silk gabardine. It also features a variation called a plastron front, meant to look like a waistcoat sewn into the jacket. This version has distinct 18th century menswear details, and she's even wearing a fine lace jabot to dress it up. The version in the center shows the large jacket collar and a thin blouse of lace worn below. On the right, we see a suit with passementerie trim, the braid and decoration inspired by military uniforms. We also see at the neck a blouse that imitates a man's shirt with standing collar and bow tie. Here we see women in a variety of tailor-made suits on the left and shirtwaists and skirts on the right. These women are posed during public activities such as bicycling or at work or school. The X shape of the era is less extreme when we look at upper middle class women. The sleeves are not quite as large as fashion plates. The neckties run the gamut from very full and soft to a man's four-in-hand tie at the far right. Even among all these delicate fashions, sports will remain important for emerging independent women. Notice these women have completely adopted the man's shirt and tie, complete with the high standing collar. The opposing persona discussed in the press was the perfect lady. This woman relished the Victorian role of being the light of the home. She could be involved in large-scale charity works and church functions, but did not aspire to work outside the home. The fashion options for this mindset were ultra-feminine, featuring complex draping, ruffles, and delicate decorations. They also feature the X shape, and you can see the sleeves are indeed quite large, larger than those we saw on the new woman. One feminine style is called the sash waist style that incorporates a wide corselet that looked like a gathered sash or a Swiss waist from the 1860s. The perfect lady image featured matching gowns rather than the separate unmatched pieces of shirtwaist and skirt. These bodices imitate several layers, but they are built into one base layer. I mentioned that many women probably fell somewhere in between the new woman and the perfect lady. There is a compromise style, not quite as progressive as the new woman's shirtwaist, but not as complex as the perfect lady's gowns. Called the plastron front or pleat front bodices, we can see one version at left, which includes a center pleated section imitating a shirt and waistcoat styling, but it is made of dressy fabric with lace. Another version on the right imitates a gathered or pleated blouse under a jacket. Both feature lace decorations and the wide sash waist or corselet styling. Evening wear in this era features the puffed sleeve at the top only, with a bare arm below. The arm is covered with long gloves that reach over the elbow. We call this opera-length gloves. The neckline changes from the plunging V-neck of the bustle era, returning to a horizontal neckline or a square. Corsetry in the X-shape era will remain the hourglass shape of the last bustle phase. The corsets themselves will be lighter, made with fewer bones as manufacturers reacted to the changing market. Support bodices remain available as an alternative to corsetry. Petticoats are bell-shaped, with ruffles and stiffeners at the hem to shape the outer skirt. Notice there's more fullness in the back, and the front is relatively straight. Women wore a very small bustle pad to shape the back of the skirt in a subtle curve. Women's underwear also remains as before, with various styles of combinations offered. Underwear now features a number of delicate decorations and laces, a specialty of this era. Here's another example of the height of decorated underwear for women. Items made of cotton or linen hold up well to adding lace and delicate details. Corset covers are worn over the combinations and corset if a dress is thin and more coverage is required, or to smooth the lines from the corset. Although it seems like a lot of layers, the first modern heating system for homes was the steam radiator, invented in the mid-19th century, and they were notorious for heating one half of a room and not the other. Many women added these layers to stay warm, with wool versions available in winter. The Belle Epoch is another golden age of ladies' hats. Large round brims were decorated with stacks of ribbons, bows, and feathers. Entire birds were incorporated into the hat, and large ostrich feathers see a revival of interest. This cartoon makes fun of the large hat brims fashionable during the Belle Epoch. Two hairstyles were very popular in this era, the pompadour as seen on the left. This hairstyle has a great deal of volume, and the hair could be piled over a form or cage to add that bulk. On the right, we see the top knot style, usually paired with hair cut short in the front to make a curled fringe on the forehead. The second silhouette in this era is the S-curve or Grecian bend from about 1897 to 1908. The X shape collapses, and once again, the visual emphasis will slide down the figure. The signature style element is pushing the torso forward and the derriere back. The bulk of the bosom appears to slide down the chest to create what's called a monobosom, or sometimes a pigeon front. This silhouette flatters the mature woman and appears to be a retraction of the youthful fashions that called for social change in the 1890s. The sleeve shrinks at the top, with volume sliding down to the elbow or wrist. The long neck ideal continues, with even taller collars worn. Some collars rested just under the ear. The signature skirt is now a trumpet shape, narrow over the hip and tapering out to a flute shape at the bottom, like an upside-down flower. This sinuous shape was very influenced by the undulating lines of the Art Nouveau. This figure shape was created with a new style of corset called a straight front corset. The front of the corset is cut low and does not push the bust line upwards. This straight front encourages the hips to tilt backwards, thrusting the abdomen forward. At the right, we can see a comparison to the 1890s corset and the 1900s corset. Corsets in this period also include garters attached to hold up the stockings, as seen on the examples at left. For many women, the corset alone could not create this large monobosom shape. Ruffles could be sewn onto the corset cover to fill and soften the front. Harder cages were available, and many dress styles also included ruffles on the front to create the illusion of fullness, as seen on the right. The petticoat also changes shape to support the widening at the bottom. The Grecian bend is so extreme in some fashion plates, we must ask, did women really look like that? Photo evidence shows us a wide array of answers. This fashion was achieved partly by the shape of the corset and partly with optical illusions that appear to elongate the torso in front and shorten the back. The shaped belt at the waist could point down, featuring more fabric between neck and waistline. Another technique was sewing a pouch of fabric in the front of the torso. All of these techniques appear to elongate the front of the body. The wealthy society woman on the left shows us a severely tilted waist belt. On the right, we see upper middle-class students who do not wear the tilted belts, but they do wear a belt that crosses over itself in front, a very clever way to draw the eye downward. Their blouses have a pouch sewn into the front, with varying degrees of success keeping those lying in place. The severely tilted blouse or gown at the left is a much more difficult patterning and sewing feat, so it is more evident in expensive and designer fashions. But the middle-class version does allow every woman the opportunity to follow the latest styles. Tailor-mades remain an important part of the woman's wardrobe, featuring the new S-shape and trumpet skirt. The woman at the left wears an incredibly delicate lace blouse and the wide collar lapel, a feature that will remain from the X shape. The signature look of the late Belle Epoch during the S-curve era will be garments made of delicate fabrics and trims called lingerie dresses, because the delicate work that used to be exclusively on underwear will migrate outward. This is another example of underwear becoming outerwear. The work was so fine it could not remain hidden inside. Lingerie dresses made of silk or cotton feature lace and fine netting. They were available in many colors, with the labor-intensive work only possible when labor is very cheap. Skirts feature fine ruffles and lace motifs. These summer dresses are featured on an auction site, and we can see how thin and how delicate they are, with lace, tucks, and ruffles worked into the fabric. This kind of work is called insertion lace, which means rows of different trims added or inserted into the middle of the fabric. The fabric is then cut away so the lace is transparent. It's easy to imagine how exacting this work would be. One slip of the scissors could ruin the dress. Hats for the S-curve are smaller and taller to elongate the body, with the brim more narrow and oval-shaped. Toques return as a favorite style to add height. Hats were also available in the lingerie style, featuring delicate lace. These are built on wire cages or forms to give strength, yet be so thin you can see through them. The pompadour hairstyle remains popular through the rest of this era, but the most fashionable styles during the S-curve tilt forward or backwards slightly. And notice in the middle image how tall the lace collar is. It is cut longer on the side to reach just below the ear. This is the most fashionable version. The hats of the Belle Epoch required long hairpins to fasten into their hairstyles. Hat pins were on average about 8 inches long, and they featured ornaments on the end. Women of every economic class wore hats outdoors. It was a mandatory part of good manners. With ladies' hats pinned to their hair, the hat was considered an extension of their hairstyle. So ladies did not remove their hats unless they were planning to stay indoors for a protracted time, such as working at a job or a long visit. It would be feasible to stop by someone's home for a short visit indoors and keep the hat on. Many homes had a small foyer with a hat rack or table to keep the hat, and a mirror to aid pinning it back on properly before leaving. Shoes were available as dress pumps or walking oxfords. Here we see pumps with decorative cutouts or straps across the instep. The style with many small straps is called a gilly style. The heel is curved, a revival of the 18th century court heel. Women wear Oxford styles, seen at the right, with decorative contrast leather details. Oxfords feature a small heel, also shaped in the Rococo court heel style. Women's high-top shoes are still available, especially for inclement weather or active sports and bicycling. Handbags are soft or hard-shaped and dangled from the wrist. Some now use the clamshell device at the top to open and close. Women begin wearing a staggering amount of jewelry in this period. Big jewelry news is that light colors become fashionable, with pearls, opals, and diamonds set into platinum. The woman at right wears a number of pieces pinned onto her dress, rings on every finger, multiple necklaces, and a starburst in her hair. A popular style of jewelry combines the dog collar necklace and ropes of long necklaces called sautoirs. Fur fashions continue as a form of wealth and status. Long stoles are the newest fashionable use of furs, and we will see both long scarves or boas and shorter ones made with the pelt of the whole animal, including the head. In 1908, King Edward makes a state visit to Russia, and that creates a trend for Russian sables as the latest fashionable fur. The illustration on the left also features our Belle Epoch dog in art. The poodle was used as a hunting dog since the 17th century. This dog shows us the traditional poodle haircut, called the continental cut, said to originate in France at either the court of Louis XVI or in the French circus. Both delighted in entertaining cuts. The torso was shaved so the dog wouldn't waterlog and sink when retrieving ducks. The puffs over the joints are allegedly to keep the joints warm in cold water. Notice there are 2 pom-poms cut out over each hip, too. This kind of coiffured cut also appealed to dog owners in the refined Belle Epoch. I very much doubt this woman was using her poodle to retrieve ducks in a lake. So this cut is now pure fashion. To summarize, women's fashion in the Belle Epoch. Women had 3 ways of dressing from 1890 to 1907, offering choices to suit a woman's personality or the occasion. The first is the dress, gown, or frock, consisting of a matching bodice and skirt, or a dress sewn together at the waist. Separates consist of a skirt and shirtwaist, with the possible addition of a bolero or other jacket. The third choice is the tailor-made suit, a matched jacket and skirt with a shirtwaist or blouse. There were 2 silhouettes, the X-shape and the S-curve, and there was social strain concerning the many changes with the onset of the modern era. none of which loomed larger than the changing role of women as the new woman and the perfect lady diverged.